All right, buckle up for something different today.
Oh,
We're diving into top 10 dumbest things to do when you're bored.
really?
Yeah, it's from the Top 10's website.
Hmm.
And you know what's even more interesting? You actually thought we could get some real takeaways from this.
Well, yeah, I mean, on the surface, it's just a bunch of ridiculous suggestions, right?
Right.
But I think if we look closer, it actually says something about people you know, like how we deal with being bored.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you won't believe some of the stuff on this list.
What kind of stuff?
Well, some are kind of relatable. Like, I bet everyone's thought about playing with kitchen knives when they're home alone and bored out of their minds.
Okay, I can see that.
But then there are some that are just so out there, you have to wonder if they're serious.
Like what?
One of them suggests joining ISIS.
Oh my goodness.
Obviously, we're not endorsing that or anything,
Of course not.
but it just makes you wonder about the people who came up with these ideas and the ones who upfelt them.
Yeah, that's where the user comments get really interesting. It's like a whole other layer to this social experiment.
Totally.
You see people reacting to these crazy suggestions with everything from genuine concern to like full-on role-playing.
Yeah, they're building whole fictional worlds around these absurd scenarios.
It's
It's
amazing.
like everyone reacts so differently to boredom.
Right.
Even something simple like being stuck at home on a rainy day.
Yeah,
Some people might just pick up a book,
sure.
but then others might be tempted to, well, jump out of a window onto a pile of carpets, like one entry suggests.
Oh, wow. Let's unpack that one for a second.
Okay.
I think that's a great example of how boredom can lead to impulsive and, potentially dangerous behavior.
Yeah, for sure.
There's actually a psychologist, Dr. Sandy Mann, who specializes in boredom.
Okay.
And she argues that boredom is kind of like a warning signal from our brains.
A warning signal.
Yeah, it's like it's telling you you're not engaged, you need some stimulation, and that can push people to seek out thrills even if they're risky.
So it's not just laziness or lacking imagination. It's like some primal urge to shake things up.
Exactly. And that urge can manifest in a lot of different ways.
I can see that.
It depends on your personality, your environment, a whole bunch of factors.
Right.
Some people might channel that energy into creative pursuits,
Mhm.
while others might unfortunately act out in more destructive ways.
Which brings us back to this list.
Right.
It's like a whole catalog of those impulses from the harmless to the totally reckless.
Yeah. What else is on there?
Well, we've got things like playing with kitchen knives.
Oh, okay.
I mean, obviously not recommended.
Right.
But a lot of us can probably relate to that urge on some level.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's that urge to experiment, to push
Mhm.
boundaries, even if it's just with a butter knife and a loaf of bread.
There's also that suggestion about using tablets as swords.
Oh, yeah.
Not the most practical use of technology, but
Not at all.
but it speaks to that desire for play, make believe, even as adults.
Yeah.
It's like we're trying to recapture that childhood sense of wonder and adventure, even if it's just in our living rooms.
And then you have those entries that are just so out there you can't help but laugh.
Like what?
One person suggests going to your parents with a silly face and saying, "I'm a little unicorn," in a goofy voice.
You're kidding me.
I mean, who thinks of that?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I know, right?
That one's really interesting to me.
Yeah, why is that?
I think it taps into a few different things.
Okay.
On the one hand, it could be a form of playful rebellion, like a way to poke fun at authority figures and see how they react.
Oh, I see.
On the other hand, it could also be a way to seek attention, to get a reaction from your parents, even if it's just a groan or an eye roll.
So it's like a weird social experiment,
Yeah, kind of.
testing the boundaries of what your parents will tolerate and maybe getting a laugh out of it.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder what kind of parent would actually find that funny.
Right.
It probably depends on their personality and their relationship with their child.
I guess so.
Some parents might see it as harmless fun, a sign of creativity or a quirky sense of humor.
Right.
Others might see it as disrespectful or annoying.
It's funny how even something as simple as a silly joke can reveal so much about family dynamics.
Absolutely. It speaks to the different ways we communicate and connect with each other, even within our own families.
And sometimes those connections are made through humor.
Even if it's unconventional.
So we've got entries that are relatable, entries that are just weird, and then entries that are potentially dangerous.
It's like the whole spectrum of human experience.
Crammed into a top 10 list.
Exactly. But what about the really extreme stuff, the suggestions that involve actual danger or illegal activities?
Well, that's where things get a bit more complicated.
Right.
We have to be careful not to glorify or endorse those behaviors,
Of course.
but we can still try to understand the motivations behind them.
Okay, how do we do that?
Why would someone suggest jumping out of a moving car or driving into a helicopter, for example.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like they're trying to outdo each other with how outrageous they can be.
Outdo each other.
Yeah, like, oh, you think jumping out of a car is crazy? What, drive a car into a helicopter?
Oh, wow.
I said competition to see who can come up with the most absurd, attention-grabbing suggestion.
And there's definitely that element of shock value.
For sure.
The suggestions are so over the top, so clearly outside the realm of acceptable behavior that they're bound to get a reaction.
It's like they're pushing the boundaries of what's considered funny or maybe testing the limits of our tolerance for the absurd.
Interesting.
But even with those extreme suggestions, there's a part of me that wonders if there's something more to it. A deeper meaning hidden beneath all the craziness.
That's a great point.
Right.
Because even in the most extreme cases, there's often a grain of truth, a reflection of some underlying societal issue or psychological phenomenon.
So, like, what does that tell us about the entry that suggests joining ISIS?
Right.
Obviously, we're not condoning that in any way.
Of course.
But it's worth asking why someone would even think to include that on a list of things to do when you're bored.
That's a tough one.
Is it a sign of desperation? A yearning for something more, even if it's totally misguided? Or is it just a way to shock and provoke?
It's probably a combination of factors, but I think it speaks to a larger societal issue,
What do you mean?
That sense of alienation and disillusionment that can lead people to seek out extreme ideologies or groups, even if those groups are harmful or dangerous.
So even in the most outrageous entries on this list, there's something to be learned.
I think so.
Something that reflects back on us and the world we live in.
Exactly. It's like a twisted funhouse mirror.
A funhouse mirror.
Yeah, distorting reality, but also revealing hidden truths.
I like that.
That's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're not just looking at a list of dumb things to do.
Right.
We're exploring the complexities of human behavior, the motivations behind our actions, and the ways we cope with the challenges of modern life.
It's deep stuff.
It is. Yeah, it really is like holding a magnifying glass up to our collective psyche, right?
Yeah.
This list, I mean, as absurd as it is, it shows us so much about our fears and desires, and how we navigate this world that can just feel so complicated and overwhelming sometimes.
And I've noticed something else about this list.
What's that?
It goes beyond just, listing things to do when you're bored.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's commenting on the human condition itself.
Exactly. Take the entry that suggests sledding down the stairs, for example.
Oh, yeah, that one.
On the surface, it seems harmless enough.
Yeah, even kind of nostalgic.
Right. But when you look closer, it reveals something about our attraction to risk.
Risk.
Yeah, that desire to push boundaries, even if it means putting ourselves in harm's way.
It's true. I guess even the most mundane things can become dangerous if we're not paying attention.
Right, or if we're driven by boredom and that need for stimulation.
And then you end up at the bottom of the stairs thinking, how did I get here?
Exactly. And it's not just about physical risks either. This list also makes you think about the risks we take in our online lives.
Oh, interesting. You mean like in the comments section?
Yeah, exactly. You see people bragging about doing these crazy things even when it's obvious they're joking.
I've seen that.
But it makes you wonder about that line between, online bravado and real-world behavior.
It's like the internet gives people this space to experiment with different personas and identities.
Right.
And they can say things they'd never say in real life.
That's so true. And that can be both good and bad.
In what way?
It lets us explore parts of ourselves, but it also makes it hard to know what's real and what's not.
It's almost like this list is a mini version of the internet itself.
How so?
Well, it's full of humor and absurdity and potential danger.
That's true.
And it's up to us to figure out how to navigate it all.
Exactly. And that requires, critical thinking, media literacy, and a healthy dose of self-awareness.
Right. We need to be able to recognize satire and tell the difference between jokes and serious suggestions. And most importantly, we need to make good choices, both online and offline.
Speaking of good choices, there's a whole category of entries on this list that we haven't really talked about yet.
Which ones?
The ones that, well, let's just say they involve things that most people would consider taboo or even repulsive.
I mean, the eat feces entries?
Yeah, and ones like that, it's hard to even talk about them without feeling a little uncomfortable.
It's true.
But I think it's important to acknowledge that they're there.
Yeah, and to try to understand why someone would put them on a list like this.
Exactly. It's definitely a challenge to analyze these entries without, making moral judgments or trying to figure out if there's something psychologically wrong with the people who wrote them.
Right.
But I think we should try to approach them with curiosity and a willingness to consider different viewpoints.
So instead of just saying, that's gross,
Right.
let's try to figure out the psychology behind these suggestions.
Exactly. One possible explanation is that they're just meant to be provocative.
Provocative.
Yeah, like a way to shock and disgust the reader.
Oh, I see.
People have been using taboo subjects for comedic effect for a long time, and this could be seen as just an extension of that tradition.
So like pushing the boundaries of what's acceptable, testing the limits of good taste, and maybe even getting a laugh out of people's reactions.
Right. And it's worth noting that what's considered taboo or repulsive is different in different cultures and time periods.
Oh, that's true.
What might seem shocking to one person might be totally normal to another.
So maybe it's not about being intentionally offensive.
Right.
It's more about exploring those cultural boundaries and challenging our assumptions about what's appropriate.
Exactly. And there's also the psychological side of things to consider. Some people might be drawn to these taboo subjects out of morbid curiosity.
Morbid curiosity.
Yeah, or fascination with the grotesque.
It's like a train wreck.
Yeah.
You shouldn't look, but you can't help yourself.
Exactly. And that fascination could be coming from a desire to confront our own mortality.
Yeah, more cap.
Yeah, or to explore the darker parts of human nature, or even just to see how much disgust we can handle.
Like a psychological thrill ride.
Yeah, a way to experience intense emotions without actually putting ourselves in danger.
That makes sense. And even these extreme entries are still part of a larger conversation about boredom
Exactly.
and how we try to deal with it
They're like a distorted reflection of our own anxieties and desires.
and the challenges we face in a world that can sometimes feel overwhelming and, well, just plain boring.
Right, and they remind us that even in our most ridiculous moments, we're still human and we're all just trying to figure out how to cope with the complexities of life.
So maybe instead of judging these entries,
Yeah,
we could try to see them as a reflection of our shared humanity,
I like that.
our flaws, our quirks, and our ability to be both creative and absurd.
I think that's a great way to look at it.
Going through this list of dumbest things to do when you're bored, I'm starting to see a pattern.
Oh, really? What kind of pattern?
It's like there are different levels of boredom almost. Yeah, each entry is like a different level of desperation.
Like a hierarchy of boredom.
Exactly. At the bottom, you have those things we can all relate to,
Like what?
like playing with kitchen knives or using tablets as swords. Just that urge to fidget, to experiment, when your mind is idle.
Right. Those are the moments when boredom is just a minor annoyance.
Yeah, you can easily fix it with a little creativity or distraction.
Exactly.
But then you go up a level and things get a little more intense.
Okay, how so?
You see those suggestions about pushing boundaries and taking risks?
Like what kind of risks?
Like sledding down the stairs or jumping out a window onto a pile of carpets.
Oh, right. That's when boredom becomes a stronger force.
Yeah, it can push us to look for thrills even if it means putting ourselves in danger.
Interesting.
And then at the very top of this boredom hierarchy, you have those crazy suggestions.
Ones that are just so out there.
Yeah, like joining ISIS, driving into a helicopter, opening the emergency exit door on a plane.
Those aren't just dumb ideas.
Right.
It's like they're from another world.
It's like they're trying to shock us.
I think you're right. Those extreme suggestions, even though they're obviously terrible ideas,
Yeah.
they can also be seen as a form of social commentary.
Social commentary.
Yeah, like they're pointing out how absurd modern life can be and how far boredom can push us.
It's like they're saying, look at how messed up everything is.
Right.
Look at how disconnected we are, how badly we're searching for meaning and excitement.
And that message really hits home because it's delivered through humor and absurdity.
It's like a punch in the gut disguised as a silly joke.
Exactly.
So this list, with all its craziness and bad advice, actually reflects our own anxieties and desires.
It shows our struggle to find meaning in a world that can often feel meaningless.
I never thought about it that way.
It's a powerful reminder that boredom isn't just a trivial feeling.
Right.
It can be a powerful motivator, something that can push us to do great things or terrible things.
And it's up to us to use that energy wisely.
Exactly. We need to find healthy and fulfilling ways to deal with boredom without resorting to dangerous or destructive behavior.
Which is easier said than done.
That's true. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. What works for one person might not work for another.
Some people find comfort in creative pursuits.
Like painting, writing music,
Others might look for adventure and new experiences through travel or hobbies or social connections.
So many different ways to deal with boredom.
And there's more and more research showing that mindfulness and meditation can also be really helpful.
Oh yeah, how so?
They help you become more aware of your thoughts and feelings without judging them, and to
Excellent.
find peace in the present moment.
So maybe the key to overcoming boredom isn't about finding the next big distraction.
Right.
It's about becoming more self-aware and learning to appreciate those quiet moments.
The moments of stillness and reflection.
That's a really interesting perspective.
Because in the end, boredom is a state of mind. It's all about how you see things.
And if we can change our perspective,
Yeah.
if we can learn to see the beauty in the everyday, then boredom can become something positive.
It can be a catalyst for growth, creativity, and connection.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the top 10 dumbest things to do when you're bored, let's remember that this list, even with all its absurdity and outrageousness, really reflects us.
It reflects our struggles and our potential.
It's a reminder to be curious about boredom
To find healthy and fulfilling ways to engage with the world.
and to find joy in simply being alive.
And maybe, just maybe, to avoid jumping out of any windows or eating any feces along the way.
Great advice. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through the world of boredom.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.